Welcome to the Finding Nebo podcast, where we talk about all things good in Nebo School District. We are your hosts, Lindsay Hughes
and Seth Sorensen.
How are ya?
Good.
So good.
I am excited for our episode today, but before we jump into that,
yes,
I was watching the House Education Interim Committee.
Of course you were.
Last week.
Yeah, of course you were.
And a really interesting bill got brought up.
Okay.
And I wanted to get your thoughts and maybe Sarah and Dave's thoughts on this.
Okay.
The bill proposes that attendance is now going to be part of a student's grade. Somewhere between 10 and 20% of a student's grade will be based on their classroom attendance.
Okay, so I appreciate Seth sent us an email with the bills that had just made it out of committee that we should be looking at. That's what it was, right?
Yep.
I still have to ask all the verbiage because I don't know. So that was the first one I clicked on, and I was like, okay, my initial thought was we have only one high school right now that students have to make up their tardies or attendance, and if they don't, it really will inhibit their graduation.
Mm-hmm.
I like that, but I also know that a lot of students wait till their senior year and then say, oh no, and there's a lot of different things that they can do where they're not really having to make up all of that time. Maybe that should not be put on broadcast, but anyway. And like my son who's in high school, I'm constantly like, why are you not actually in class right now? And I'm not excusing anything unless there's valid reasons. But they're not being penalized. And so actually, I think it's a good thing that I think our kids need to be in class. I think that's where they're supposed to learn. I also think maybe that will, maybe our teachers need to look at like, why don't kids want to come to my class? So maybe that would help build better relationships with our secondary kids. Because I know that my students go to those classes where they feel like
connection,
where there's that connection, where that they know that teacher cares about them. They know that teacher wants them to succeed. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen in every classroom. But I know my own kids have a few that they're like, yeah, I don't want to go to that class. And can you blame them if there's not that relationship, if they don't know the teacher actually cares about them? Anyway, I do think at first glance, I'm like, yeah, I actually would be okay with that bill. I want my kids in class. I think that's where the learning happens. I think it's actually a sad thing if they don't go to class and they can still get an A. Like, I think there's a problem there. So anyway, I agree. You know, I'm not opposed to it.
All right. Well, Dave, what do you think?
I actually got my master's at Western Governors, which is
all online,
competency based, which it leans more towards you can still get an A even if you don't go to class.
Yeah.
So I wonder about those kids who are the quick learners who pick it all up on their own and they don't need to go to class. But at the same time, they still should be in class.
Yeah.
That is where they are expected to be, and if they're not in class, they're probably causing problems somewhere else.
No,
if not for themselves, for their peers.
I like what you said there, and there is another part to this bill that I did not mention. I neglected to talk about it. It is the ability for students to test out of any course. So let's say a student already knows the information, they could go in, take a test, and not have to take the course. So the only courses they would be required to show up to were those that they had not tested out of. So,
and I also didn't read all of it, but I know there is some, like, if there are excused absences, there's so many of those, which again, I appreciate because we don't always wait for a break to go on a family vacation or things come up and kids are missing school. And as long as they're excused, again, I think within a certain amount, that doesn't count.
And we are a parents' rights state. You
Yeah.
know, we believe that parents have the ultimate control over their child's education.
Right.
So, Sarah, we haven't introduced Sarah yet, but we're going to get her feedback first.
Yeah. I actually really love this idea too. I'm with Lindsay. My son actually does attend the high school that does have the attendance policy.
Yes, he does.
And it does make a difference. He's very aware. He tries to manipulate it a little bit like all 17-year-olds do, but it's like, Mom, I don't have enough tardies to, be under that, or to keep me under that detention threshold or whatever. But I ultimately think if our job is to prepare our students for real world, right? Do you get to not show up to your job and still receive a paycheck?
Yeah, absolutely not.
So really, ultimately, if we're simulating what real world experiences are in our schools, which I appreciate, and speaking of the classrooms that we're successful in, most of our kids, those have real world connections too. So
Agreed.
when my kids know I'm going to take this and I will apply it somewhere, they ultimately try harder, which you have to show up to try hard,
Yep.
right?
Yes,
So
yes.
I tell them all the time, this is your job.
Yes.
Really. I
Yes.
mean, we can have our little few hours a week jobs or
Yeah.
whatever, but I show up to work for however many hours a week and get paid and rewarded for that. You get paid in these grades, which the payouts come having college kids. I'm going to
Yes.
tell you those come in like, other forms as well. Not only do they learn how to navigate difficult relationships and difficulties in, these classroom, like, oh, I have to have this conversation with my teacher in order to be able to turn in this assignment that is late or I missed or whatever. So
yes.
I really think this bill could help us in that real world preparation. Of course, there's positives and negatives
Right.
to all things.
Absolutely.
And as we know, when these do pass these committees and they go to legislature, what they start with can ultimately be
Yes.
nothing like what they're
Yes,
passed
agreed.
or nothing like
Yeah.
they end with. But this will be a fascinating one to follow and
I
to
think so
watch.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yep, I think so too.
So ultimately, I'm for it.
All right.
Okay, so you just heard a little bit from Sarah, but Sarah, before we get into your role in Nebo School District, which is very important, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself. Where did you start? You've done so much in the district, so tell us about yourself.
Well, funny enough, I started as a technician at Mount Beaufort Elementary. I worked in the office a half day and was an overload technician back then when we would have large class sizes. I remember this. I was with, for those of you who have been around a long time, I was with Angie Killian. I was her overload technician in her class. And we had 28 first graders. So it was complete chaos all morning long. And then in the afternoon, I spent some time as a secretary in the front office. So I appreciate those perspectives because at the end of that, I still want to be a teacher.
Yeah.
So that's
good.
That was good.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I taught first grade for several years. I taught Spanish Oaks and East Meadows Elementary. Then I had the opportunity to be a facilitator and mentor teachers at East Meadows and Canyon Elementary. And then I took a little bit of a jump and leaped into the secondary world and went to Diamond Fork when it was a junior high. So we had 7th, 8th, and 9th graders there.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole different ballgame.
Yes.
And my, props to everybody who works in a junior high or a middle school.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yes.
that is not for the faint
Bless
of heart
you all.
at all. After that, I ended up back in the elementary world and became the principal at Mount Lofer. So I spent a few years there. And then when Maple Grove opened, I got the opportunity to go back and spend some time in the middle school. And then last year, I landed this role that I'm currently in. And so I'm on year 2 of this role and then added some more responsibilities to it.
Yeah,
as
so
well.
what is your position here?
So I am, by definition, the safety and security specialist for Nebo School District and the risk manager for Nebo School District. So dual roles, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Some of it's overlapping, a lot of it isn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, really, I have a large span of a footprint that I get to cover. And the thing I love about it is I have been able to meet people that otherwise I wouldn't know
Right.
in this district,
Yeah.
I've always said this, like we work within our 4-wall perspective. So whatever that is, when I was a classroom teacher, my 4 walls involved the kids and their families that I served,
Yep.
right? When I became a mentor and a principal, my 4 walls became all inclusive of an entire building.
Yep.
And then stepping out of those buildings, I think we get this perspective that is, it's all inclusive for me of 48 actual like school settings.
Yep.
And then all the other additional buildings that we have that
Yeah.
I get to work with. So I've got to meet a lot of amazing people that we have here in our district.
Well, we're really excited to have you here to
Thanks.
talk about safety and security in our schools because I know Lindsay and I get asked quite often
Yeah, we do.
about what it is we're doing in our schools. You know, as we're out in the community or we're working with reporters or whoever it is that, you know, is coming down to the
Yeah.
school district to talk, that's one of their top concerns. So we wanted to bring you on to have that conversation to let parents and patrons as well as students and employees know some of the things we're doing. And we know you can't talk about everything because we keep some of those things under wraps because
Absolutely.
we don't want it to get out there, you know, everything we're doing. But give us a little bit of background kind of on where this all started
Yeah.
and where it came from.
Yeah, because I was just gonna cut in real quick. Sarah's position, safety and security specialist, is literally, this is the second year that it's been around.
Yeah.
Correct.
Risk manager has been for
Yeah.
probably always.
Yeah.
But House Bill
Well, we started with 84.
84.
Really is the instigator to my position, I guess, or
Yes.
the causation.
So
of my
that
position.
that came into play, and it was like we have to have a safety and security specialist. So Sarah was appointed, and we are so grateful for that. But yeah, talk about
Yeah, where it came
you can
from.
talk
Yes,
about where it
yeah.
came from.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I'm a learner always. I learn something new every day in my position, but I can tell you that these positions really stemmed and started in 2019. You wouldn't believe it, but they did. So in 2019, after you guys know, the reference point for school safety and security really is Columbine. So you talk to
Yeah.
anybody in law enforcement, and
Yeah.
you talk to really those in the know in education, and they will tell you that Columbine is the number one catalyst for, wow, we really need to wake up and really look at what's happening in our country and our schools. So a lot of talks were happening, and in 2019, the state of Utah established what is known as the School Safety Center. School Safety Center is a hybrid between USBE
Okay.
and DPS, which is our law enforcement agency, right? That's the overseeing agency for any law enforcement, all the way from highway patrol to county, down to your
city.
local
Yeah.
agencies.
Okay.
Yes. So DPS is kind of that umbrella. So they really started to marry those two worlds. Well, we all know the pivot point in a lot of things is COVID. So that all kind of got tabled, right? And from 2019 up until about 2024, we saw, like all things, an influx in school shootings and other emergencies that were happening in our schools. And so, you know, props to our legislatures and to all those who lead in our schools and also those in law enforcement to say, we really need to look at this and we really need to come up with some plans. So
Yeah.
in 2024 is when we saw House Bill 84 come out. House Bill 84 is lengthy. It's lengthy, lengthy, and it is all
And how many
inclusive.
times have you read it?
You know, I've actually fully read it at least 3 times, and I still don't understand 90% of it. But if you saw my original copy, you'd chuckle because it's like I just highlighted all like
Highlighted the
100
whole
It was
thing.
all
pages.
important.
Yeah,
It was
because
all-
I'm
yeah.
like, oh yeah, that's a big thing. But then you read the next thing, you're like, well, that one's big too. So, you know, the whole like how you actually annotate, I annotated the whole thing, and then went like, wow, okay, we're taking on a lot. What we saw in 2025 was a revision or an addition to as well, House Bill 84, and that's House Bill 40.
Okay,
So House Bill 40 really clarified a lot of things,
good.
and it also confused a lot of things.
good.
So from that, we've seen a lot of administrative rule come out. So administrative rule really is our clarification for how we act or implement these things.
Okay.
And I think we'll continue to see
that-
more.
mhm.
So, you know, Seth talks about things that are coming out of committees that are being pre-approved. I think you will see that school safety is not
It's
going
not go- yeah.
anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
When
It's
I
a permanent
originally took
fixture.
this position, I think there was just kind of this mutual understanding of like, hey, we need to build some programs, we need to get them up and running. They'll really become self-sustaining. And
We found out real fast.
we found out real fast it's not. So I
Yeah.
think we're just going to continue to add to that. I think with recent events in our county especially, and also events that out in our country but really connect to our
Yeah.
communities here locally. This is not going to be less, and it's not going to go away. So I think that we're going to see a lot of legislation come out of it. I think, and I'm hoping for a lot more clarity on some of
Yes.
these mandates that we have, and also maybe looking at this marriage that we have between law enforcement and education and helping that. You know, I'm lucky. I have a great marriage with our law enforcement agencies in Nebo,
yes.
and
You guys are amazing.
oh my gosh,
And
amazing.
and as a mom and an educator, I'm glad
Mhm.
that all of these things have been coming out. You know, parents talk about all the time being really scared sending their kids to school.
Mhm.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I feel like my kids are in good hands. We have good people around us. Our law enforcement are incredible. And so I think it's a good thing it's not going away. I think it's a good thing
Yes.
that it's not just self-sustaining. We got it in place and now we'll just let it roll. Like, I'm glad that it's continuing to be on the forefront.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be.
And I think it's, you know, I think it's more comforting too, because it used to be that you had an SRO that would visit the school, right? And that was really the security we had. That was it. We had the SRO that would show up occasionally. And, you know, as a parent, I always felt really relieved when I'd see that police car out in the front of the building.
Right.
But now we have a whole number of layers of protection that
Yes.
are securing our kids in these buildings.
Yes.
And I think we wanted to get into a few of those today, too.
Absolutely. Yeah, because parents are constantly asking, how are you making my child's school safer? So let's talk about a few of those things.
Yeah, I think this is they're again multi-layers, multi-dimensional to this. So I really want to look at it in three facets. Number one is going to be a personnel facet.
Okay.
So under House Bill 84, there was a creation of a state security chief.
Okay.
So obviously, when you're saying security chief, that alludes to this is coming out of law enforcement. So Matt Pennington was appointed out of law enforcement to be our state security chief. It then created a tree, I guess, of responsibilities where there are multiple sergeants throughout our state. We're divided up into regions. So we have an overseeing sergeant out of the state security office who we know well, who pops in our schools. He's really learning our schools well, giving some great feedback. Wonderful to work with. But we also have a local county security chief. So every county in the state of Utah also has a chief who was pulled off of their other duties, and this is what they do, is they are in charge of school security from their viewpoint, right? So you can kind of already see where this marriage is coming from and going to go with this. Then comes my position. So every school district or charter school, anything that would be deemed a public school in the state of Utah, has somebody to oversee their safety and security. They all hold a different title depending on what your district or school calls it, but we all hold that same role. And then every school has also a safety and security specialist. So we have 48 of those in our district that I work with closely, and there's a lot of things that we do, especially when we talk about the buildings in a minute. They really are our eyes and ears in those buildings for us. And then we also created school guardians. We talked a little bit about school resource officers. So in that House Bill 84, we know that we now have armed personnel in our buildings. So Nebo School District is compliant with that, and we have deployed our personnel for that. You had three choices in that flexibility of who are we going to arm in our schools, right? We could have full-time school resource officers in every school. Unfortunately, we don't have the funding.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Right.
that's
That's
entirely
a
that.
big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah, I mean, that is
We'd
a
love
big lift.
that.
Oh, I would
However,
love that. That's phenomenal. That's the
We
dream,
have a
right?
budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, and we have to follow it, and there's no extra to
Yeah.
just throw at it. So, school resource officers are one. The second one would be private security. So we could go out and hire private security out of a company or kind of do our own thing there. And the third option is an opt-in volunteer basis of employees that we already have in our schools who would say to their principal, I would love to volunteer to serve in a role or a capacity as a school guardian. So that's the term for it. That's what you hear a lot throughout the state. I would tell you most of our districts have school guardians. However, we're seeing some other models come out. I happen to know you're going to see another option proposed in legislation this year
Okay.
of a different way to, they're called special functions officers. So they're actually law enforcement. They're not full officers like our SROs. They're trained a little bit differently, things like that. So So watch for that.
Interesting.
If you guys
Okay,
follow
yeah.
legislation, watch
Yeah.
for that for sure. I'm fascinated. I can't
Yeah.
wait to see what happens with all of that. But in Nebo, yeah, we did end up going with the guardian route, right? And it's not to say there's no expense to it. There's definitely
There's actually
an
been a big
there's-
expense, I think,
There's
yeah.
just a lot of training that they have to
Yes.
go through, right?
Yeah, there is a lot of training actually with that personnel piece. They so these are employees that say, you know what, I feel an obligation or a duty, or this is something I want to do.
Right.
And you guys, it's fascinating. This is not people who, out of the gate are saying like, oh, I'm completely proficient in firearms and I feel comfortable and confident. Like yes, I have that and I love that. And I am so thankful for them to just be like, hey, this isn't, secondhand to me. I'm
Yeah.
happy
Yeah.
to do it. But we have people who
Never
literally
fired a firearm.
no. And
Wow.
yes,
That's so interesting.
again,
Yes.
I will forever sing the praises of law enforcement and what they
Absolutely.
do with people. And if you want to know who are second best in teachers compared to teachers,
Law
it's
enforcement?
law enforcement. It is the firearms teams, and
love it.
they're phenomenal. I have so much respect for them, and I have so much respect for the people who showed up from our schools to say, I'm willing
I'll do
to
it.
learn and I will do it, because
I agree.
from the time they enter till the time we certify them and they can exit that initial training, the progress, it actually filled my teacher heart, because
Oh,
that's why I taught first grade, right? I taught 6-year-olds because you could watch them come in, they couldn't tie their shoe or button their pants.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I am an excellent.
or hold their book the right way.
Oh yeah, no,
right?
I
Like,
mean, yeah, I actually recall a time where I think it took you and 2 of your fellow teachers, like 3 of you, to cover my classroom at East Meadows back in the day. I'm not calling out Garrett Anderson or Adam Gold, but I'm
I was
pretty
a
sure
fifth
it
grade
took
teacher.
3.
We don't know how to
Right,
teach
we don't-
first grade. Our kids
So-
know how to
True.
tie their shoes and button their pants and hold a book.
But by the time they left first grade, they could do those things. And by the time these guardians, who honestly, some of their eyes were so huge,
Oh, I
but by
bet.
the time they left, like, to watch them just feel confident and to know, like, this isn't a one and done.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing, is we will forever be learners and we will forever be practicing these things and continuing to learn. So,
And I think our listeners, sorry, we're not listeners anymore. Viewers need to hear that, is that that initial training, it's not a one and done.
Oh,
we're not
no,
like
no.
check done. Whew,
Yeah.
you guys
Here,
are
here's
good
your-
for the
Yeah.
year, good
Here's
for
your
5
firearm,
years.
go shoot
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, you hit the target,
Yeah.
you're
It
good
is
to go.
it is continual throughout the whole year.
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Even people that have been around it their whole lives, this is one thing I loved, is they're like, oh my gosh, like, I can tell you for a fact we have some people who are competitive shooters, and that's what or I have people who have served in the military. It's fascinating, like, to see just this broad spectrum of individuals who have shown up to volunteer to do this.
And they're still learning, right?
Oh my gosh, they have learned so much. Like,
Yeah.
they're seeking out more, actually. If I could have an unlimited budget and an unlimited amount of time,
I wish you could.
we could utilize it. It would be phenomenal. So it's very motivating to watch those
I
people.
love it.
The other component I think we really have to look at is our actual physical buildings,
Yeah.
and our physical
Yes.
spaces.
Yeah.
And speaking of budgets, I don't think there's enough money in the world to get us through all of this. But, that's what we do when legislation comes down and says, signed, stamped, delivered,
You
you're
will
gonna
do
it.
this.
You'll do
Yeah.
it.
We do
With no
what
funding.
we do with no funding. We do what we're asked. I will appreciate that they have come back and have been able to fund a few
Some of
things
it. Mhm.
under some grants. We've been able to write some grants and receive some monies to
Yeah.
help improve our buildings. So a couple of those things under the grants and the fundings are, we are currently in the process of updating and upgrading all of our camera systems in our schools. So some are top notch, especially all these new builds that we have in these beautiful buildings. Like,
Yeah.
we might need 1 or 2 more cameras, but that includes updating our servers. That includes putting everything on
It's
a
not
cloud.
just the physical
Just-
camera.
Oh no, I say
Yeah.
all the time, like, this is the guts, right? Like,
Yeah.
we have to update these guts of these systems. Because by law enforcement needs access to our cameras in the state of an emergency, right? And so we need to be compliant with that. So we actually are putting almost $1 million into
Wow.
upgrading and updating our camera systems. And I think we're only about 10 to 12 schools shy of being all on a cloud system, which is a
Wow.
huge
Wow.
celebration.
It is.
Absolutely.
In the state of an emergency, our PSAPs, which would be also referenced as a 911 call center,
Okay.
the goal or the idea is they have access to all of our systems. An emergency happens, there's a quick login, a selection, boom, they can pop up all our cameras
They've got it right there.
in
Yeah.
the location,
Yeah.
which helps so much if you think about that. They will constantly be advising and walking law enforcement through, and they can watch it live and have
Incredible.
Wow.
yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting to see happen. The other one is, and this has been a little hot button topic the past couple of years, but you know, the door locks and magnets and all the things.
Oh yeah, the magnets.
Yes,
Man,
yes.
that is a hot topic.
Oh yeah, and you know what? Like I give it to teachers. Like when the magnets needed to go away, have been some creative ways for them to prop some doors open and keep them open. So props to these teachers and for saying like, okay, you tell me I can't have a magnet, I got a little workaround.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
So props to them. However, there isn't a need for that, and there won't be a need. So we also are working on updating. The law does state that all of our internal locks need to be a push button lock, or if the way I've been able to explain it to help people understand is you need one single action to have your classroom door locked and closed, right? So in state of stress, we know that our fine motor skills are gone.
Yeah.
We also
Right.
know that our reasoning skills are gone. So you up your stress, and you think about this, if this were to happen in your school, like, could you physically find your keys,
Yeah.
get outside of your classroom door to
To-
lock your door, and then close everything else, and then get your students where they need to be? We know that's not
Yeah.
going to happen.
Absolutely not.
We also happen to know that in the case of a school shooting, there's never been, and I'm going to hold that with an asterisk, but there has never been a school shooter who has actually accessed a classroom and caused harm with a door that was locked. So any of our school shootings and all the data that we have behind them, those shooters access
Interesting.
unlocked doors, open doors. It
They're
was
looking
never,
for ease.
Yeah.
again,
They're
and
not, yeah.
yeah. And Columbine was not our first school shooting. We really do use that as our learning point and our tipping point for school security. And so having that knowledge, they have done that is one trend that they have watched in law enforcement and done a lot of research on. So this is why it's a priority. Everybody wants to know, like, why can't I put a magnet in? It's so inconvenient that my little first graders have to like knock on a door or whatever. Well, in these upgrades, all of our classroom doors will have a lock with an indicator. So
Yes, I've
there's
seen those.
Yeah.
yeah. If you go to a lot of our schools, and I'll give a shout out to our maintenance department, because again, we got about $1 million in funding to implement this. Well, we chose we're going to spend it on product, right? We want to buy these retrofit kits, and
yes.
let's
As
maximize
many
it.
as we can. Yeah.
And also shout out to maintenance, because they currently have 26 pallets of door locks taking up space in their shed. And I know that they probably cuss me every morning when they walk in there. But slowly but surely, we're taking them down pallet by pallet
Good.
and installing those in schools. And our maintenance department's doing all the
That's
install.
incredible.
And so a lot of them are retrofits. Our brand new builds, you'll see those from
Yep.
here on out in every school that's a new build. But really what it is every classroom door will be locked on the outside. So locked on the outside, meaning you never should have to put a key in that door to lock that door. But you can keep it closed. Kids can come in and out. It can be unlocked at that point, because you know that from the inside, there's an indicator that will say locked and unlocked. They're red and white. I mean, it's pretty
Yeah.
again, first graders can figure it out. Like red, we know we're locked. So with a single button push of that button, you'll know that door is closed. You don't have to use a fine motor skill to do that. You do not have to use multi-steps to do that.
Yep.
So,
One push, you're
yeah.
safe. Yeah.
And the best part is we can confidently tell our state security chief, yeah, you bet we are compliant with that piece of the law,
Good.
Yeah.
And so we'll continue to work on that. That'll be about a 2-year project for
Okay.
that. There are a lot of others. So those are really in the process projects. We have the cameras. We have the locks, the other thing that you'll see is our secure entries in our
Nice.
buildings. So shout out to Nebo that well before my position ever existed, there was a lot of like foresight on this and thinking. So, about 5 years ago is when this initiative started in
Right.
Nebo. And remember, these bills didn't even exist at that time to say we really need to put in these secure entries. Now, for your viewers and listeners who are parents, yeah, we get it. It's inconvenient and you don't like it.
Yeah.
Because I used to be able to run my lunch to my first grader's classroom and give them a little hug and tell them, and now you're going to make me wait all the way outside to be buzzed in, and you might identify me with my ID if you don't know who I am, and all of these things. And even if you do know who I am, like, you're probably going to interrogate me with what's my purpose or reasoning
Yeah.
for being here.
And also, no, you're not
Yeah.
taking it. You can leave the lunch here.
Yes,
We'll give it to your first
exactly.
grader,
And
right?
it is inconvenient. As a parent, like, yeah, if I needed to run something to my elementary school kid, like, to be able to access them so quick would be nice. But unfortunately, that's not the world that we live in
No.
anymore.
Okay.
So at this time, all of our elementaries do have a secure entry. And that does have video feed to it, also has audio feed to it, and it requires access being given by that front office, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And our hope and our intention behind that is that we do become compliant with the law to say we're vetting every person that comes into
Yeah.
our building we know their intent, we know their purpose, we know how long they're going to be here. And that really does speak loudly to maybe those who don't have the best of intentions, because they're going to be like, man, like, how do
I even get
Yeah.
in?
Yes, and that's what we want. And I want to know I send my babies to a school that someone with ill intent is not going to be able to access them either. So,
And I haven't heard any of the negative. I'm sure there is some negative, but the only negative I have heard is when is my school getting that secure entry?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And so I haven't heard any chatter lately.
We
Yeah.
really are just about finished with those
Yes,
secure
we-
entries
we
too.
really
Or
are.
5?
yeah, so right now we have 4, and they're all in the middle school, junior high settings to get those in place. And then we will do the 2 high schools. So, do keep in mind with like a Springville High School rebuild, obviously we're not going to
That'll
put a
be done
secure entry.
when it opens.
Right.
Yep.
But when it opens, they will automatically have that. Payson High, Spanish Fork High have that. But then as soon as we're done with these 4 junior highs, we'll move into the high schools
Salem
and
Hills
make
is one.
make sure that they have those as well. And so then
And then we're
our school
That's
entries
so
will
awesome.
be secure. It really is awesome.
It was a long you said 5 years we started.
Yeah.
So it's been about 5 years to
Yeah.
get all 38,
48.
48.
48
Oh, I said
locations.
38. I knew there was more than that.
Yeah.
48 locations
And,
secured.
and
That's
going
awesome.
back to something you said earlier, we talked about SROs. They haven't gone away either, right? So they're
Oh.
still a resource in our schools.
You guys, they're the best. When I have so much respect for law enforcement, and again, remember they were given the exact same legislation we were, and it was thrown in their plate, and they're like, "Hey, you're gonna train
Now you're
guardians.
training. Now you're.
You're gonna certify them in this," and they're looking at us like, "Really? I gotta really this person?
This guy over
Like,
here,
we're
I'm
gonna
gonna
work with-
train. Yeah.
And funny enough, I think when I showed up, they were like, "Oh boy, like really, this is who Nebo gives us."
This
You
is
know?
the specialist.
Yeah, but I cannot say enough positive about our law enforcement, and that goes for our SROs. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you I have the best of the best to work with. So we have full-time SROs in all of our high schools. Now I want you to know that we do double layer. So we didn't say to our secondary schools that do have SROs like, "Oh, don't worry about guardians."
You're fine.
Absolutely not.
I'm so glad.
SROs
Yep.
are pulled out for multiple reasons. A lot of them still are case managers and have to do investigations. Anytime we have a minor go through the court system, an SRO is typically assigned to that. So there are reasons they go out. Also, if there were an emergency at some other location,
They're going.
they're
They're
going.
responding.
They're absolutely responding. So our high schools have an SRO with them full time. Speaking of a presence, one thing I love that our SROs do is you can pretty much pull up to any of our high schools and you're going to see their car right out
Yes.
front. Well,
Right
what kind of
front and
message
center.
does that send somebody?
Absolutely.
You know what? We value our students so much that we choose to have that relationship and that partnership. Our middle schools and our junior highs are on a split. So each feeder pattern, I guess you've probably talked about that a little bit, has an SRO that they work in the middle school and the junior high. It just depends on their schedules and how they set that up with their admin. Is it a half day here, a half day there? Is it one day on, one day off? But either way, they're still responsible for those schools as well. And then all of our cities and our agencies have been phenomenal to also give us maybe not a fully trained SRO, but they'll put a sergeant or a lieutenant in charge of the other schools. You'll see a lot of them pop into schools,
Yep.
especially our elementaries. And I encourage this as well, like, hey, if your patrol guy needs a break, tell him to go to an elementary school. They get to be a hero for 5 minutes, right?
Yes.
Like the little elementary kids just look at him with their big eyes like, that's so cool.
You know,
So
one of the coolest things I think we see on the first day of school is down in Salem. I know Chief James sends officers to every building to welcome the kids.
yeah,
And I think some of our other cities do the same
I
thing.
think so,
And
too.
the welcome that they get and the excitement on the kids' faces when they see them,
yeah.
I think is huge. And they're not seeing them as, oh, there's the police. You know,
Yeah.
it's, oh, here's
Yeah,
our officer.
so-and-so,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
they know them by name and
They
they're
do.
excited to see them and they build that trust.
Yeah. And you know what? I think just the feedback and the conversations I've had with them, like, it's really fulfilling to the officers as well. You know, think about it. Most of their interactions in
Are
their
negative.
It's
day-to-day
negative,
job,
yeah.
right? Nobody,
It's
like, every
miserable.
time you see the red and blue lights behind you, now
Yeah.
that I get pulled over a lot,
We're not
but if I
excited.
were,
But, yeah.
No.
we're like, ah, crap, you know? So to have those positive interactions, have them feel that, but also us be able to, like, provide that for them. And we want them there. I tell them all the time, I'm like, oh my gosh, you stop in any time you want in any school you want.
As an
We
elementary
love to have
school
you.
principal, I loved when an officer would come and just
Yeah.
walk through. They'd stop in the office, chat for a bit,
Yeah.
and then take a lap around the school. And I
Yeah.
think the other thing that it helps with is that parents, because originally when that started happening, it was like, call to the secretary, what's going on at your school? And like, nothing. Our
Yeah.
friends are just stopping by.
Yeah.
They're just checking in. They
Yeah.
just and
Yeah.
now I don't think you're getting as many calls about why is there a police
Yeah.
officer at your school?
They
It's
just
oh
know
cool.
it's part of the rotation.
It's part of the rotation. They're just there to
Yeah.
walk around and make themselves
Yeah.
seen and check everything out and go to the next school.
Yeah,
You
as
know.
but as part of the House bills, the state adopted what we call a standard response protocol. So we know we had a faulty emergency at Spanish Fork High a few years ago, and there was some miscommunication into what is the terminology,
Right.
what do we call
Yes.
these things? So the state did adopt. It's from the I Love You Guys Foundation. If you get a chance to go on their website, that's a phenomenal resource, and we actually use a lot of those resources, you know, state mandated, but they're the best resources that we have access to right now for sure. And so we have this standard response protocol. Well, with that, we drill. So all of our schools conduct emergency drills every single month. These are not necessarily lockdown drills for
Right.
like an active shooter, although that's part of the law that we do those. But they'll do a hold or a secure or anything. And the cool part about what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot of our schools reaching out to our law enforcement to say, hey, would you come drill this with us? Well, not only does that help our law enforcement learn your building, your physical space and building, but then they start to say, okay, I know that these classrooms, if I need to exit them from the building, I know that there's, you know, this is accessible to them outside. Or they'll come to the outside of our building and say, in an emergency, if you have 300 kids outside, what are you going to do with them? And they will help give some perspective and some insight. And so schools are required to build an emergency plan to say, in this emergency, this is what we would do, right? All the while knowing we have to be flexible because not everything's going to go how
Yes,
we've written it in the
yes.
plan. Actually, it probably is not going to go according to
Yeah.
plan. But we do have to have a plan in place for that. And then we also need to have that plan in place to actually reunify our students with their
Yeah,
parents after
yeah.
an emergency. So those are two mandated things that our schools need to have compliance with. But also, our law enforcement is hungry to work with our schools on that. And so through a lot of conversation, I had a conversation actually with our lieutenant in Santaquin just last week. He called me, or maybe it was Monday, I don't know. And we just were talking through and he's like, hey, I'm going to go to a school this next week. I've got 4 guys coming. We're going to do this. And then would you be willing to come and let's do a debrief with the faculty and staff after? Here's my vision for this. Here's some questions. And I'm like,
Right.
I love it too. It's phenomenal to see. And it's not without a lot of work and a lot
Yeah.
of trust on both sides.
Yeah.
They have to trust that we know they're the experts in this. They
Yes.
train for thousands of hours to respond to scenarios like this.
Yes.
We train for thousands of hours to love people's children and to be warm and welcoming, and this is foreign to us.
This is.
But they love to provide that feedback and that experience as long as we'll allow it. And I love that our schools are craving it and they want it. They want
Yeah.
to do what's right. This
Yeah.
is one thing I know about educators in general, and I consider anyone who works for a school district an educator.
Agreed.
But educators want to do it right,
Yes.
right? And we want to make sure we're following all the rules.
Yes.
We're really big rule followers, which
Yes.
is quite funny, but we are. And so they want this feedback. They're craving it.
Yes.
Our leaders in our schools are craving it. Our safety specialists are craving it. They want to know, and so just watching this somewhat organically happen, but not without establishing those relationships first. It's awesome. It's
Yeah.
so motivating. Yeah.
I don't know if our viewers and listeners can tell, but Sarah literally knows what she's talking about. And I don't
Yes.
know if we
Absolutely.
could have appointed a better
gosh.
school safety and security
Safety and
Yeah,
specialist.
I know. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot of S's and a
it
lot
is.
of, but
Yeah.
anyway, I'm so glad that it's you because
Thank you.
I can feel your passion. I
Yeah.
know that, like you said, you're a rule follower and you're gonna do it right. And you got this new
Yes.
position and you dug into these bills and you figured out what we were supposed to do and you're like full steam ahead.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that it's you. And
Well, thank you.
I feel great sending my kids to school.
Yes, me too.
I know they're safe.
Yep.
I hope
think
they do.
they go, and I think teachers feel more comfortable.
I think so, too.
I think staff
Yeah.
feels really good about where we're at, and I think even the community,
Yeah.
they're starting to feel that. They're feeling that, hey, our kids are safe here. There's
There's a lot
really
of things in
nothing to worry
place.
about.
Yeah.
We've got it.
And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
change is hard, I think. Some people do well with change, a lot of us don't with big changes. And I think in our community, they see all these changes and they're like, wait a minute, what's happening? You know, and it is hard because I know conversations are happening. I know that we're sharing documents. I know all of these things. I also happen to know that when I get 7 emails from the school, I probably open 2 of them. And they're usually the ones that say my kid missed class or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily these things, but you know, when that change is something that you physically see, we have no choice but to address it. So
Absolutely.
watch for some other changes happening in our schools. We're gonna see bleed kits, which are small triage kits.
Cool.
Those are going to be, honestly, the state has issued those. We just got those ordered, so they'll be in every single classroom and learning space
Great.
in our schools. We will have beefy first aid kits in all of our gymnasiums and all of our front offices. You know, finally something that's more standardized.
Yeah.
Instead of like, well, this school has some buckets and this one's got some
Yeah.
blue bags and this one's got nothing. So, but we haven't had a standard to follow, right?
Yeah.
We haven't had that rule
No.
that we needed to follow. And now that we
Right.
do, we're going to do
We're gonna
that.
follow it.
We
Yeah.
were told that this needs to happen and we'll do that.
We're not
we-
just going to rely on
No.
ice in a bag and
Yeah.
wet paper towel,
Hey, though,
right?
the
Those
lead-
work really
I mean,
well.
they do
though.
work well.
The
They
lead
do
paper-
work
I mean,
well. But
that will dry up tears faster
Yeah.
than
And
a
a mint.
sucker.
If you can
Mint.
give them a mint
A
for their
mint and a bag
belly,
of ice
amen.
Yeah.
and
We
a
got
wet
it.
paper towel, like that's all you need. I wish doctors' offices knew that.
Yeah, me too,
all
for
you
sure.
need.
It's all you need. Well, also watch for, we are in compliance with an emergency response system. We run the Raptor emergency system. That's not new to us. However, something that is going to come is we will have every classroom, and I don't want to say classroom teacher, I don't want to be misconstrued, but every classroom where kids are being serviced will have an adult, which would likely be a lead teacher, but it really could be an adult who will have a 1 button. It'll be like a necklace type or something on a lanyard, emergency response button that will be directly tied to the PSAP or the 911 call center. The state is actually approving those, vetting those companies. I know there were over 40 that applied. They've got
Wow.
a lot of work to do.
Wow.
They'll select down to 2 or 3. We will have the option to choose to opt into that. Whether that means, you know, we have that and Raptor, or we go to a 1 platform, who knows, but just watch for that. That's also something that's coming. You're gonna see a lot of things being updated and upgraded in these buildings. And when you work in one physical building, you're gonna be like, oh, that safety gate wasn't there yesterday, but again, shout out to our maintenance department who's helping us establish like how can we be compliant in all of these things. They are amazing. I just have so much respect for them in general. But yeah, you're gonna see a lot with our physical space. And then really quick, the other thing that I wanted to highlight was there is a whole component that really falls under like student services. I think you'll see a lot of this with like Rochelle Shepard and Danny Lundell, also probably Everett getting really involved, but there is a mental health component to all of these bills. And we need to identify our at-risk students before something like this happens in our schools. Another data point or statistic you have to know is that most school shooters either are a current student of that school or a prior student of that school.
Wow.
There are some that are connected to the school in a way where they want to inflict harm on, a family member or something else like that, but most all of them either currently attend the school that they cause harm at or prior attendance there. So we need to watch these kids.
Absolutely.
There's a lot. I sat through a big training on Monday with a state team, and they talked a lot about like online games and this immersiveness that our students are getting into. And you know what, you guys, we're parents. We still think gangs are out on the streets. Like I was mind blown, and I looked back at one of my law enforcement members, and he actually sent me a text and was like, we gotta talk after this meeting, because it's new to all of us, and it's so fast paced that by the time we think we got it figured out, they're already into something else.
Yeah. I mean, we just found out about it, right? And how long has it been?
Yeah, quite a while. Yeah. And actually, a lot of recent events in our county as well as in this country do have direct or indirect ties to these scenarios. And so we need to have an awareness of that. But we can watch these trends in our students. We can watch behaviors.
Yeah.
Those guys are masters. We've already got platforms in place. Again, props to Nebo. Like, I just think we're so good at like our forward thinking that we can be a step or two ahead. And then we can even pull back a little bit and be like, okay, well, are these steps matching what we're required to do? But our panorama surveys that we give our students and the monitoring that we're doing with mental health professionals, and in that capacity working with DCFS, working with the CJC, like all of these things are helping with that mental health component, which essentially, if we can identify that, then we're even less at risk for something happening in our building. So if you look at this threefold and say, okay, we have a personnel scenario, we've got a physical building scenario, and then we have this component with our students who ultimately that's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
We're here because of kids. Every single one of our jobs. I don't get the joy of being the favorite, like, oh, I love my teacher. But I get that feel in other ways. And so I'm very passionate about this. I believe in this. I believe there's a need for it. And I believe in the people who continue to show up for our kids. Yeah. You don't choose to be in education if you don't love kids in some way, shape, or form.
Amen.
And you learn it really fast, and if you don't, you're probably
out. That's not the place for you. Yeah. Sarah, this was so enlightening and so good. And we did an episode on safety and security a couple years ago. This is way more information heavy. I think the people that are still worried about safety and security in our schools will not be worried any longer. If this blows up your email, because now they have a face
now they know
and
who
a
you
name.
Are.
Sorry, you can send them to me and Seth, and
just
we'll try and answer as
my
well.
name on that email.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
won't get it anyway.
SARA. That's how you spell Sarah.
No.
Anyway, we so appreciate you being here
we
today.
appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for having me, you guys. Really, thanks for having me. And again, please, I actually welcome questions, because questions help me know where our deficiencies are.
What do we need?
And what we need to beef up, and where we need to communicate better. So
thank you to Sarah, but also a huge thank you to law enforcement and our volunteers in our school, and maintenance, and everybody in Nebo who's helping this move forward. So thanks.
Thank you. And we'll see you next time.